The question is, I really can't grasp the whole hypertonic-hypotonic idea. I understand the isotonic solution, but I don't understand the part about the inside of the cell being hypertonic and the outside being hypotonic. To understand this question a little bit better, we need to understand a little bit about the cells. When we talk about a cell here, we notice that there's things inside of the cell. And when I talk about things, we're talking about the mitochondria, the nucleus, the lysosomes, the cytoplasm itself, that's the liquid, the rough ER, smooth ER, things like that. On the outside of the cell is going to be a liquid, and that's going to contain gases, waste products, and nutrients. And separating the two is going to be a thin layer, a thin membrane. And this membrane is going to be selectively or semi-permeable. That means that the cell is going to allow things in and out as it needs to, and this is homeostasis. And when we talk about most movement between cells, most of the movement is done by either diffusion or osmosis. Osmosis, when we talk about water, and diffusion when we talk about other solutes, that's the solid parts. What happens is things move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration until equilibrium is reached. This is an example we've seen in our book where a small piece of dye has been put inside of a beaker of water. And we notice that what happens is that beaker of water is going to turn the exact same color of blue from top to bottom. There's not going to be any spots where it's going to be heavier or whatever. It's going to keep moving around until equilibrium has reached. The same thing if you bake cookies, that odor of that smell of the cookies is going to be throughout the house until equilibrium has reached. Here we've taken a tube, it's a glass tube, and what we've done is we filled it with water, and with the water we've put sugar. In between the two glass tubes, we've put a semi-permeable or a selectively permeable membrane. Only water is going to be allowed to go from one side to the other. So water has the freedom to go from the left side to the right side or from the right side to the left side. In here we notice that we have more sugar on the right hand side and less sugar or solute on the left hand side. If we leave this sit, what's going to happen here is that this solute this solvent, the water, is going to move from the left side over to the right side. And the reason for this is that if we took out all this sugar here, we would notice that there is less water here on this side than on this side. These sugar molecules are actually taking up space and taking up room here that the water would be. So if we took those out, we would literally have less water on this side than on this side. So what happens here is that the water through osmosis literally just moves from one side to the other side, even if it raises it up. Now let's look at it this way here. This is the example that's given in the book with the blood. Right? We have the blood here. What happens in a hypertonic? That means this solution on the outside is going to be filled with, let's say, for example, sodium. What's going to happen is that there's going to be more water per size inside the red blood cells than on the outside. So this blood is literally going to say, well, to reach equilibrium, I have to take my water outside of the blood and I have to push this to the outside where all this salt is. By doing that, this begins to crenate. It gets smaller and wrinkles up. In an isotonic solution, like in, for example, saline solution, if you go to the hospital or whatever, the emergency room, they give you the saline solution immediately, right? What happens here is that the outside solution is the same as the inside solution. So that means the water is going to come in and go out. It's just going to freely move around just constantly. Now what happens here with our hypotonic solution is that this water on the outside here is going to be pure water. There's going to be nothing in it. Since our blood has things in it, such as the red blood cells have the hemoglobin and the iron and things like that in it, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a greater amount of water on the outside, or pure water on the outside, and it's going to try to enter into the bloodstream, into the blood cells. And this is going to cause the blood cells to lyse, rip, and tear. So the hypertonic is that the solution on the outside has more solutes than the blood. Isotonic, they're the same. The solution and the blood have the same amount of items in it, if you want to call it as such. And the hypotonic solution is that the water or the fluid on the outside, the solution on the outside, has less things in it, or is more pure, if you want to call it, than the red blood cells themselves. So here's a few definitions we need to remember when we're talking about this. Diffusion, moving from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower. And osmosis is the exact same thing, except for it's water moving from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower. With isotonic, and we look at the word iso, that means the same amount of solute inside as out. The same amount of things are going to be on the inside as there is going to be on the outside. Hypertonic, hyper, means that there's more solutes on the outside than on the inside. Hyper, more solutes on the outside. And hypo, more solutes on the inside. Or perhaps you want to look at it and say less solutes on the outside. But hypo is that there's going to be more on the inside than the outside. I hope this answered your question. If you still don't understand it, it's important for you to ask and let us know, because this is a really important concept, and throughout most of our studies we're going to be talking about the way that diffusion and osmosis works with cells. Thank you.